If you're sold on writing code, you'll need to get an editor for writing it. CodePen is an awesome way to learn code, experiment quickly, or share code with others, but it's not a long-term development environment. At its simplest, you need a text editor to edit your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript coding files. Notepad on Windows or TextEdit on Mac are already present on your computer. However, these programs are somewhat lacking, starting with the code isn't color-coded, making it harder to read and find errors. You can write code with these programs, but should you? There are many other choices for code editors, most of which are free. In my experience, the favorite choice seems to change every 5 years or so. Let's look at a few of the most popular options. Currently, the editor that most developers seem to use is called Visual Studio Code, or VS Code. It's free, runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it comes from Microsoft. You'll see VS Code used in a number of LinkedIn Learning courses, including many of my own. Recently, VS Code was made to run directly in a web browser. You can access this version of VS Code at vscode.dev. Another favorite is Atom at atom.io from GitHub. Atom is also free and runs on Mac, Linux, and Windows. Atom is open source and highly customizable, making it a favorite with developers who enjoy customizing their workspaces. You may think that it's odd that two editors come from Microsoft. GitHub was purchased by Microsoft in 2018. However, VS Code and Atom were created in 2014, prior to the merger. Many designers are fans of Brackets at brackets.io. Brackets was formerly an editor from Adobe and runs on Mac or Windows. Adobe has released Brackets as an open source project which will be maintained by the Brackets community going forward. Finally, Sublime Text was favored by the web development community for years, but it's recently fallen out of favor. It's located at sublimetext.com and has a fee of $80 to use the editor. Many front-end developers still have Sublime installed on their machines, even if they no longer use it often. It works on Mac, PC, and Linux. These are just a handful of my favorite editors. In all likelihood, your employer will point you to a preferred editor, or you'll develop a favorite through your college, coding bootcamp, or through watching LinkedIn Learning videos. GitHub is a technology that's used throughout web development. Unfortunately, there are few explanations that describe what its purpose is. Let's talk about Git, GitHub, and why these tools are so important in today's development environments. If you've ever created a Microsoft Word document, you're probably familiar with versioning. Document final, document final, document the real final, and so forth, until you think you're done, but more changes are made. Maybe you've started to attach version numbers to the document as a result. You keep the earlier versions of your document just in case you need to go back to them, or in case someone decides that they like the earlier version better. This is what Git was designed to do. Git is a software program that runs on the command line on your computer. Git will do all of the things I just described, like keeping versions of your code, enabling rollbacks to earlier versions of the code, tracking the changes made, and so forth. Git is great, but it's a bit more difficult to share coding files with others. That's where GitHub comes in. GitHub uses Git to do all of that versioning and file management work, combined with web hosting to enable easy sharing of files within a team of people. While you may use Git without GitHub, you can't use GitHub without Git. Git is deeply integrated into GitHub itself, so much so that people often forget that they are separate services. Let's take a look at a typical GitHub page using Bootstrap as an example at github.com/twbs. Here you'll see the team of contributors to the Bootstrap project. There's also a group of projects called repositories or repos. These are individual projects within the Bootstrap organization. In Bootstrap's case, there's the actual Bootstrap framework itself, as well as icons, a blog, and other projects as well. Each repo includes the files and folders that make up that piece of software. Let's look at the Bootstrap repo. Inside of this, we have access to the code under the Code tab. This is the current code under development for Bootstrap. We have a tab for Issues, where users are reporting bugs and other problems with the software. A pull request is where someone has written some code that they'd like to contribute to the project. The maintenance team will decide which pull requests should be included, if any, in the released versions of Bootstrap. The LinkedIn Learning Library offers many courses for all levels of expertise on Git and GitHub. So if you'd like to know more about this important aspect of web development, check the library for more information. Websites are only visible to the general public if their web server is also accessible to the public. When web server software runs on web server hardware, and that system is maintained by a company who will sell you some space on it, that's referred to as a web host or hosting. While you can host your own website on your own computer, you really shouldn't. Your internet service provider may have rules prohibiting you from doing this, and you really don't want just anyone looking at the website from your own personal computer. Fortunately, web hosting is relatively inexpensive, and there are many companies offering it. If you're building a simple website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, any web host will support you. Indeed, the simplest option may be through GitHub. Using their free GitHub Pages service at pages.github.com, you may post your website code on GitHub and view the site through their service. However, there are many other types of web hosting available. Shared hosting is web hosting where one web server has thousands of web hosting accounts located on it. You share this server with thousands of sites and their corresponding traffic. Hosting is cheap, often less than $100 per year. However, customization of the hosting account is limited, and your site may run very slowly due to the other sites on the same server sucking up all of the server's resources. More expensive options exist, which will give you better performance for your website. A virtual private server, or VPS, will have fewer accounts per server, maybe only a dozen or less. Or you could go with a dedicated server, where you'll have control over the entire server for your own work. It's unlikely you need either of these options for a small portfolio website or for schoolwork, but it's good to know that they exist for your future career. Finally, you'll see many hosting companies talk about cloud hosting. Whereas standard web hosting offers you a fixed service, cloud hosting will scale with your needs in the moment. If you have a ton of traffic for one moment in time, cloud hosting will accommodate that, while standard web hosting might be overwhelmed. Pricing for cloud hosting is generally tied to usage, so the more traffic you have, the more you'll pay. In general, as you get started with your early websites, shared hosting or GitHub Pages is likely the right fit for you. Later in your career, you'll encounter many other types of hosting. A domain name is the address for your website. For example, www.linkedin.com is the address for LinkedIn. Domain names are often inexpensive, and it's easy to purchase one or several for your website to go with your web hosting. To choose a good domain name, think about something that's easy to say to someone when talking, easy to spell, not too long, and memorable, ideally. Your name might make a good domain name to start. For example, my website is at www.jenkramer.org. I also own variations on that domain name, including jenkramer.net, .com, .biz, and even jenkramer.rocks. I'm not necessarily using all of those domain names at one time. Just because you purchase a domain name does not mean you must use it. However, you will be asked to pay a fee to renew your name once a year. That price may range from $10 to hundreds of dollars per year, depending on what name you choose. Domain names may also be associated with countries. If the name ends in 2 characters, this is often a country code. For example, a domain name ending in .com.au is an Australian name. Today, there are hundreds of endings for domain names, which take us beyond the usual .com, .net, or .org endings. You can buy names that end in .education, .guide, .dev, .app, and hundreds of others. To purchase domain names, you'll need to go to a domain name registrar. Your web host may sell domain names for purchase, which is often the easiest solution for those who are just starting out. Alternatively, you may buy your name from a domain name registrar like domains.google. Once you've purchased the name, you'll need to work with your web host to point the name from the registrar to the hosting. Think of this as adding a road sign on the internet. The sign is added by making changes to the DNS, or domain name system. Your web hosting company and domain name registrar will have very explicit instructions for making these changes and connections. It often takes about 48 hours for the changes to apply. After that, when you type your domain name into your web browser, your website at your web hosting will be pulled up. Most developers own a few dozen domain names. Most of those names aren't in use. They were often a brainstorm for a new service or a business that they want to build, but they just never got around to doing it. Other people are speculators, purchasing names that they think will go up in value. In any case, the best name to purchase is often your own name with some type of easy ending. That will eventually be the basis of your portfolio website, a blog, or other personal work. Your name is flexible enough that it could be anything, and it's also work safe. That makes it a perfect choice for purchase as your first domain.